Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Horn Call podcast. This is episode 23 for the month of June 2022. I hope that wherever you are, things are going well for you, both in your horn playing and life in general. We have a very special guest today, and I'd like to tell just a little bit of a story about my relationship with this guest. I've known who Randall Faust is for a long time. I first met him about 10 years ago, and he's been such a warm, friendly, and wonderful influence. You know, as horn players and musicians, we have a special relationship with our private teachers, of course, and our colleagues and fellow students of the horn. But then there are folks that you meet who aren't necessarily your teachers in a formal sense, but they are your mentors and supporters and encouragers, colleagues, and then eventually friends. And I certainly count Randall Faust among those. For many, many years, he was the horn professor at Western Illinois University, host of the Western Illinois Horn Festival. He's been a past president of the International Horn Society. He is an honorary member and just an all-around fantastic guy. Today, we are talking about the International Horn Society's Composition Contest, which is open now for submissions. The deadline to submit is December 1st. Of 2022, and I wanted to talk to Randy today about just all things related to this competition, the history of it, how things got going with this, venerable tradition of the Horn Society. It's been going now since about 1979, so over 40 years. It's not necessarily every year, but a regular occurrence. I think we cover a lot of different topics, but I think the bottom line with this competition is that if you have something for horn in your composition catalog, or if you're contemplating writing something for horn that fits with the categories, make sure you do it. The entrance fee is very minimal. It just covers the overhead of running the competition. The judges are knowledgeable, and the submissions are anonymous. So there's no preference to a particular composer or pedigree or anything like that. So you can be assured that it's going to be run in an equitable way. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Randall Faust about the IHS Composition Contest. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm really excited to talk to you about the IHS Composition Contest.
Well, I'm honored to be with you today. This has been an interesting project for over 4 decades now, and I was very lucky to be invited by Gail Cheesebro, who was the coordinator of the Composition Contest, to start participating in it. Well, actually, my first official participation as one of the judges for the 1981 Composition Contest. Mm-hmm. And one of the categories then was works for horn and electronic media, and that had been an area of my interest at that particular time, and had written a number of pieces that way. And so I was tapped to be one of the judges, and also Gilbert Trithall, who had written a book on electronic music, who was a professor at West Virginia University at the time, and Tom Hutchison, who was a professor at that time at Middle Tennessee State mm-hmm. University, and also composer of music for horn and electronic media. And so that was sort of my entry point. And then about, one of the pieces that won was this piece by Francis Chan for horn and electronic tape, as we called it in those days, and a copy of the actual real tape, and of course the mechanics of the contest. Then too, people would submit. They would submit the scores. Uh-huh. They would submit reel-to-reel tapes of the recordings.
Oh my goodness!
And of course, in this case. He also sent along recording of just the electronic part, and all the participants in that particular division did. There was also like an ensemble division and things like that as well too. But so that meant that, like, when I got my materials, and Gail Cheesebro was dealing with all the materials that came in, a huge box that held the scores and the big reel-to-reel tapes and all this. And of course, I don't know. I think the Horn Society, that must have been a big chunk of their budget. Just at least the budget for the contest was to take care of mailings for all that sort of stuff to the judges. But it was quite the thing. And then about a year or so later, the things had come out in the Horn Call and the articles and all this. And I got this phone call from Gail, and she says, well, James Winter, who had become the president at that time, said, well, we need to have some performances of these pieces, and we'd like to have you play this piece at the next horn workshop, which is in Charleston, Illinois at that time. There's the 1983 workshop. And so that was an interesting thing, sort of like it teaches you a lesson. Be careful what you ask for, you might get it, because I had a chance to play this piece, and it was a great piece, and I grew a lot as a player in order to do that. And of course, I was getting it ready for that workshop, and I played it on several recitals where I was teaching at the time, Auburn University, and then a number of other workshops. And whenever I had a chance to go somewhere else and play, Marvin Johnson, who is a composition professor at the University of Alabama, was a great colleague and supporter of a lot of things I was doing. And so I played it over there amongst other places. So so that's it. It's you get involved like this, and that's something I encourage a lot of the Horn Society members to do, to get involved one way or the other, because it can lead to a lot of interesting things that way. And then, of course, then I was asked to write some articles on that line, and the next thing I knew, I was doing reviews of new music for the Horn Call, stuff that Gail Cheesebro had started. And she's one of these people that some people might not know about, but she was one of the people that made things happen. She and Philip Paul were sort of the co-founders of the Southeast Horn Workshop about that time. And of course, you're quite familiar with Philip Paul.
Yep, he was the horn professor at Appalachian State University, which is where I did my undergrad. He had actually retired by the time I got there, but I certainly knew of his name and had, saw, as often happens when the professor retires, you see scores and things with their stamp on it that circulate through the horn studio because they've been generous and donated a lot of their materials to the studio that way.
So yeah, there's some great things that were happening in the Southeast at that time. Very creative activities, and that was a very active area for horn players. I think in part because of people like Gail Cheesebro and Phil Paul, and of course the weather in the Southeast is such that you can drive in March to other places, to a workshop where it's a little bit harder in some other parts of the country. So
that's true.
World sports that goes to. So.
Yeah. Now I want to, if we can, Randy, I want to step back just a little bit, and we mentioned sort of the early days of the composition contest. Those who maybe, let's just say, or who are of a more recent vintage, might not know just the history of the whole contest. It's got started in 1979,
Yes.
and we don't have to get super deep into the weeds here, but do you remember what sort of the impetus was to start something like that? And I kind of have an idea of it, but it would be great to get it from you, if you remember any of the early conversations about what would be the reason for starting something like this.
Well, let me make a quick plug. There's this wonderful book.
Absolutely, yeah.
The International Horn Society, the first 50 years that Jeff Snedeker did a great job of compiling, in the whole detailed stories there. But let me just sort of summarize. In the very beginning, that was some of the things that they were interested in at the very beginning of the Horn Society. And after a couple of years of just sort of getting things organized and getting the workshops going, there were a couple committees that organized the idea of maybe having a contest. And I think Doug Hill's line was to have this contest that would provide new and successful repertoire for the horn, to encourage emerging composers to feature the horn with all its versatility and new works, and 3, to encourage all horn players and horn teachers to investigate and perform new repertoire. And so some of these people who were some of the founders of the Horn Society, that was one of the ideas. And finally, in 1979, they had the very first contest. And as I was mentioning, Gail Cheeseborough was the coordinator of that. And she tells the story of, the whole business of getting judges together to judge this thing. And so the 3 judges that year were Alfred Reed,
oh goodness,
Václav Nelibel, and Karl Husa. And they were all going to be at the Midwest Band Clinic in Chicago that year around Christmas time when that takes place. And I know you participated in that, so you know about that. And so Gail took a tape recorder, big real tape recorder, and the scores and everything, and they met in their hotel room there in one afternoon and evening, and they went through all the scores, all the recordings, and all that, and they picked the winners for that particular time. And then in 1980, at the big workshop at Indiana University, they were all premiered. And I remember that also, because I was at that workshop in 1980, which was great. But earlier that year, I was teaching at Shenandoah Conservatory in Virginia at the time. And they had a big band clinic there, like a lot of our schools do.
Right.
And the guest composer was Václav Nelibel. Okay. Now, I got to be the guy that drove him back to the airport on Sunday evening after the whole weekend was over.
Right.
And so I'm asking him questions. He was one of the big band composers of that particular area and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He says, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I teach horn and composition and all that." He says, "Horn." He says, "I was just on the committee judging the works for the International Horn Society Composition Contest." And he started singing the tune from David Stanhope's Horn Players Retreat and Pumping Song.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He was so excited about that. And here you are.
Yeah.
And he was singing that, and that took us halfway back to the airport in Washington, D.C.
That piece brings back so many good memories of,
Okay, so
yeah, that's such a good one. If people listening, if you don't know that one, you got to check that out. That's the Horn Players Retreat and Pumping Song. It's I've actually done just the pumping song by itself, but the slow intro is also it works well as well with the fast part of it. But
yes, and of course in that particular contest they had other categories. Works for horn and voice, for example. And there was a piece by Donald Grantham, La Noche en la Isla, for baritone, horn, and piano. That was a winner. And Donald Busaro's Death Be Not Proud for soprano, horn, and piano. And, of course, those appeared in the Horn Call, nice reviews by Gail Cheeseborough. And then another piece that was the honorable mention that particular year was Stephen Winterig's Pastiche.
I know that piece.
For horn ensemble. And now that's interesting too, because here's a work along with the David Stanhope that have become pretty much standards as far as horn ensembles. Every university horn ensemble sooner or later plays some of those, and the various other horn clubs around the world. Well, so some of the things that were the very first winners or honorable mentions have gone on to become some standards that way.
Yeah. If you could, maybe for any composers who've stumbled across this podcast and might be thinking about entering something into this composition contest for this year, the 2022. Could you give me a brief overview of the structure of the contest? There's a couple of different divisions, and then there are specific, instrumentations. And if you want to share a little bit about that, you don't have to get super detailed because all of that information is available online. But what would be some nice hooks to get potential composers interested in submitting something?
Well, of course, yeah. hornsociety.org. You go there and look under the composition tab, and there'll be a section there for the composition contest. And we have basically two divisions. We have a feature division and a virtuoso division. And we do this because we have a certain number of people in our society who are virtuosos to some of the greatest players you're going to find in the world. Soloists and members of major orchestras and all that sort of thing. But we also have a great number of people, say, like who are up-and-coming students or amateur players. There are a couple of big horn clubs around the country I know of on the different coasts, shall we say. One I visited a couple years ago down in San Diego, and it's a group called the Hornswoggle. Doug Hall, who is a horn player with the San Diego Symphony, organizes it, and they meet at a church in downtown San Diego. And I had lunch with a guy who's a lawyer by profession, who is very active in that group, and they do a lot of performances which are just how should I say community service.
Right. Yeah. Community engagement and yeah.
So we have two divisions. This feature division, where anybody, any member of the Horn Society, should be able to play the piece.
Right.
And then the virtuoso division, where there's no difficulty limitation on that.
Right.
And so that's what we're doing to accommodate sort of the different levels of players and different interests. I mean, sometimes too, somebody who's a virtuoso player is doing a big recital, and in between the big piece, say for horn and electronic media and a major concerto they're going to play, they want something that gives them and also the audience a chance to rest musically for a second. And so I remember, for example, one of our founders, Philip Farkas, always liked to play pieces like the Romance of Camille Saint-Saëns, which, very young players, amateurs, all this can play that technically, but a great player likes to play it too because it's a good piece. And so we try to cultivate different levels that way. So a person who wants to apply, just go to the Horn Society website. If you have a project in mind, or maybe in the works that is, say, something of more moderate difficulty, take a look. Every year we rotate that featured division. This particular year is pieces for horn and keyboard instrument. Now, keyboard can be piano, organ, mallet percussion, any sort of keyboard instrument.
Right. Even harpsichord.
Even harpsichord, yeah. Or electronic keyboard. Whatever.
Right.
But the idea is that it's something that the average horn player could play, or somebody more advanced. Then the featured, shall we say, the virtuoso division, the categories are for solo, that is unaccompanied horn, horn with vocal ensemble, horn with a chamber ensemble, horn is a say soloist with a large ensemble like a concerto or something like that. And there's a pretty wide range of possibilities there within the virtuoso division, and we've had a lot of interesting works like that. One of the honorable mentions of this last contest was actually a concerto for horn and orchestra by Aaron J. Kernis, Pulitzer Prize winner. A beautiful piece that was written for, amongst others, John Bowen, who's the principal hornist of the Chicago Lyric Opera.
And the Grant Park Orchestra,
Park Orchestra, and that piece was premiered there. And so we've had some really major pieces by major composers that have become part of our project that way.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, how does the committee arrive at the instrumentation for each time the composition contest occurs? Is there a set list you're working from, or do you kind of look at what is in the repertoire and maybe where things could be developed more? I've always been curious about that.
Well, the idea is that we have these different categories, so to speak, and then we rotate them.
Okay, I see.
Like last time around, the 2020 contest, the featured division work was for horn ensemble.
Okay.
It's in the virtuoso division this time.
So there's a schedule of this year, this happens in these categories and so on and so forth.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Because we know that, how should I say, a composer when he's writing a piece or a commissioner when they're commissioning a piece don't necessarily check the Horn Society website first before they write the piece. Or
Sure,
but somebody might be interested in take it that way, you know. So we rotate that around to try to open things up as much as you can and still have some sort of focus that makes it possible to judge. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some of the hard questions now, if you don't mind. In your opinion, what do you think makes a good composition for the horn? What do you think are some of, and I know it's hard to get into specifics because composition is, it's so subjective, but as someone who's seen probably thousands of these pieces come across your desk, are there things that stand out to you about the way a composition is put together that make it a good piece for horn? Well, yes, and that's the critical thing in this this particular competition, because you could maybe submit a piece, say for horn and I'll say chamber ensemble. That opens up a lot of possibilities. It might be a really great piece, but say maybe the horn part isn't all that great. And so even though the overall piece might be great, and we've played a lot of orchestral pieces that way, right? Where the orchestra, the symphony or the whatever the overture was a great piece in many ways, but the horn part was like, oh, okay, and so it's possible that a piece could be a prize winner in some other category. But maybe not a prize winner in this particular competition because it's and so horn players would know about that, and it has to be, even the virtuoso pieces have to be playable.
Right.
if a major player can't work it up within their schedule, it's not going to happen. And so we also ask that the composers, that's part of the requirements for the competition, to submit a PDF of the score, and it has to have all the identification marks on there. You can't have your name embedded in the tempo markings or something.
Right, yeah, so it's anonymous, yeah.
It's totally anonymous, and then also a recording. Right. Now sometimes composers say, I don't have a horn player in where I live or like this, and so they'll submit. And of course, we're very fortunate right now, those of us who are composers, in that you can do electronic simulations and have a piece for say horn and orchestra with the finale sound file that you produce with it, and you can have a respectable representation of the piece.
Right. They're not bad. They're not bad. They certainly aren't as good as a live recording, but the sample libraries are getting more and more robust.
Exactly. And composers we all use those, and it's very nice to be able to have that. Now, if I had recommendations to composers, I would say start collaborating with a horn player as soon as possible. Because if there's a really fine horn player, and I'll just say at the nearby college or university, wherever you might be, have them read through some of the stuff, and that will tell you something right away. A little personal story. You might be familiar with the works of William Presser, the late William Presser. And he has quite a few things for horn and piano. And I had recorded a bunch of them with Terry Lewis a few years ago. And I knew him by way of Interlochen. He had also been a professor at University of Southern Mississippi, but he had a southern home, a summer home, shall we say, at Interlochen on the lake. And he would come over now and then and have a piece. And he said, "Could you read through this for me?" And I said, "Sure." And so I play through it. And he said, "Randy, that sounds really hard." I said, "Well, Bill, it is." He says, "It sounded really easy on the computer."
Oh, yeah. We've all seen finale rendered parts that I'm sure they sound fantastic on the computer, and then you go to actually do it in real life, and it doesn't happen the way you think it would. Yeah.
So we can go back to Mozart, Ludwig, and Punto, and Beethoven, and all the greats of the earlier area. That's a good example of collaboration right there. But right now, if a person has a nearby horn player, get them involved with a project. And of course, often that's how these things get started. And I urge horn players to go talk to a favorite composer of yours that you're in touch with, and get them writing for you. And if you have a chance to read through some of the spots beforehand, I'm sure the composer would appreciate it. And then it's going to turn out to be a better piece. And I know that from my own experience, that when people are able to play through it, and sometimes it might be hard, but, there's a difference between hard and impossible.
Yes.
And so we want to do that. And then you're more likely to get a better product and come out better if there's some sort of sense of collaboration that way.
And that makes perfect sense. I think if we could, so let's talk a little bit about, there are so many opportunities now, relatively speaking, compared to earlier in the last century, for composers to get recognition and win awards and that sort of thing and build their career. What might be some reasons for a composer to participate in the IHS Composition Contest? What are some incentives, and what might be some good things to come out of that for a composer?
Well, of course, we list a cash prize of $12.50 for the winning person in that winning composition in that particular category. But the advisory council for a number of years now has made allowances, I think even going back to the very first one, for honorable mention. Because there's a limitation on money. Doesn't matter if you're a big foundation or a group like our Horn Society, but there's going to be some music that's submitted that's very good, but doesn't get that pick.
Right.
And so we make that allowance, and then the other thing is we try, and this is one of the things that I've been involved with since the early '80s when. I got involved with this with the advisory council, and James Winter asked me to work on this project. We try to get the pieces played at a workshop, if possible. There's some things in terms of the dimension of the piece. It requires two orchestras and a partridge in a pear tree.
Right. Yeah.
It's not going to happen. But if it's possible, we try to get it played at a workshop, which gives it some exposure. The winning piece and the honorable mentions get a review and a discussion in the horn call, and that goes out, as you're quite aware, to thousands of people around the world. Yep. And then also, then in one of the subsequent issues, we also, and we've done this last time on the website, every piece that's submitted, the name of the composer, the composition, and their address, contact information is posted there. Because, like this last time, we had, I think, 88 pieces submitted.
That's wonderful.
And some of these are by very major composers, and some of them, good composers, people maybe have never heard of, and up and coming, and great pieces. And so somebody, will look at that list and say, I'll make up a name here, Dr. Smith. He lives in the next town over here, teaches that college. Right. I'm going to call him up and see if he'll write a piece for me, or maybe I can get a hold of that piece he just sent into the Horn Society, because I have a trio for horn, bassoon, and percussion, and we're looking for music, and he just wrote one. So we try to get the word out about the composers and the pieces they've written, because that can help the composers and the horn players both.
Yeah, and I will say one of my favorite things about going to any workshop of any size is hearing a piece I didn't know. I'm sure you know this, the longer you do this, the more pieces you know, because you've just been around longer. And it's so nice to hear a great piece for the horn that you didn't know before, and it gets you excited, and you're humming the tunes as you leave the hall, and you're like, I got to find out if that's published. I need to find out more by that composer. And it's happened to me dozens of times, and it's what keeps me going back to those workshops.
Yeah, and it could be something which is a really major piece, or it could be a piece that you're looking for something for that sophomore in your horn studio who's not quite ready for this piece yet, but the piece they're working on, there's kind of past that, and if you want something that will fit in that niche there, or maybe that in-between piece that's coming up for their junior recital, and they need a contemporary piece to go along with the movement of Mozart they're going to play too.
Now, how do you all go about selecting the judging panel these days? You mentioned, Carol Husa and Vaclav Nelibel from the early days, and how do you go about setting up the judging now? Well,
it's there's some suggestions, and they're described in the book Jeff Snedeker has. We try to get people who are substantial composers, and at different stages. Some are also horn players too. For example, in 2014 competition, one of the judges was Andrew Boyson, who's also a horn player. For example, and has written many pieces for band and all that sort of thing. In some cases, there might be a trumpet player like Tony Plug, but he's also a really great composer of international reputation. Dana Wilson was one too. Well, he's written a lot of pieces for horn that Gail Williams, for example, has recorded as well too. And the last competition, we had Margaret Brower. And the one before that, Elizabeth Raum, the Canadian composer. And so we want to get people who are composers of substance. We also want to always have somebody in there who has background with the horn.
Right.
In some cases, there actually are horn players, but maybe there are people who've a proven track record of writing for the horn. Well, for example, the last competition for the 2020 competition, the judges were Margaret Brower, who was the head of the composition department at Cleveland Institute of Music for a number of years. And she has some pieces. There's a wonderful piece called Scherzoid for solo horn that Skip Sneed is recorded. Another one who was on that committee was Kaz Makala,
Right.
whose concerto for horn and wind ensembles made the rounds quite a bit in recent years, along with pieces for horn quartet and all that. And
all of his arrangements and transcriptions. Yeah, he's very well represented. Yeah.
And currently, he officially retired from the University of Illinois about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And he went back to Poland in his retirement. And they said, Kaz is back in town. They put him to work. And now he's busier than ever teaching students at the Chopin University there in Warsaw.
Oh, my goodness.
And he has a new piece that's going to be premiered at the Texas Symposium in August. A piece.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Piece for solo horn, which was commissioned actually by another member of that judging panel, Ricardo Montesinos. Of course, if anybody is aware, Ricardo was a winner or honorable mention for several of our competitions running. So there's no question about his capabilities that way, and also he's a hornist himself.
He's so prolific, right? I don't know how he sleeps. He might not sleep. Maybe he only sleeps a couple of hours a night. I mean, he's just churning out really good compositions, one after the other, which is exciting to see.
Right. So we try to get a panorama that way. Mm-hmm. But we're trying to find people who are, proven track record as composers, and also people that have a proven track record in terms of knowledge of the horn.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's good to point out at this point, if this has piqued any composer's interest in this is not limited or restricted in any way by age or pedigree. You do not have to have been a published composer or had formal training to participate in this contest. There is a submission fee just to help cover the overhead of the contest and judging and that sort of thing. But it's very reasonable as far as these things go. And so, for any composers out there who are listening to this, there's no reason not to submit something to the Horn Society's composition contest.
Well, exactly. And that's why we have this anonymous setup. Mm-hmm. You send in a recording on MP3. There's no way you're going to be able to tell it. It's given a random number by the software when it's submitted. Yeah. That's all the committee sees as number XYZ or whatever. Right. And then also the score is a PDF with all the information removed, and then there's a short description of the piece.
Right.
Which is is good information for the judges and everybody involved there. But in that, there's nothing that can have a name identifier in there. So we've had people like 1 year, just a few years ago, one of the honorable mentions was a student from the University of Montana.
Okay.
And it was a fine piece for solo horn, and was played at our International Horn Symposium in Brazil.
Oh, okay.
In 2017. Okay. And the other piece for solo horn that was played on that same recital was a piece by Ricardo Montesinos. Mm-hmm. Again, the judges didn't know who had written which piece, but one was
right.
Like his was the winner, and then this other one was the honorable mention. But also on that same recital was a piece for horn and piano by Kachia Chen, who's a composition professor at the Curtis Institute of Music, called The Silent Flame.
I've seen that one. It's available on... I think it was maybe published in the online music sales. I don't know if memory serves, but yeah, I've seen that piece come across my inbox at some point. It's an amazing piece.
Yes, wonderful. And then that same concert included a piece, a sonata for horn and piano by Arthur Gottschalk, professor at Rice University Shepherd School. Then just to widen this up, a couple of the contests, just most recently, the winner of the Virtuoso Division was a piece by Catherine Lakuta from Australia, of course, who's originally from Ukraine.
That's right.
A piece for solo horn that Peter Luff, who's the horn professor at the Queensland Conservatory in Brisbane, had commissioned and premiered. It's a funny story behind that. I threw a shoe at a cat. But about 3 years before then, 2014, she had a piece in the Virtuoso Division for horn ensemble called Hard to Argue. She has these funny titles on her pieces, but it's great music.
Oh, that's wonderful, yeah.
And Peter's group from Queensland was playing on that, but also involved with the commission of that piece was Adam Unsworth.
That's right.
Horn professor from University of Michigan. So there's a real international dimension on these. And again, you see a certain amount of collaboration going on that is significant. If you study some of her music, then you get an idea of the level of horn playing in Australia.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's some of the stuff. It's very rhythmic and very intricate. But I mean, Kathy's music is always engaging, and it just pulls you in. So I'm a big fan of her stuff. Yeah.
So we've been able to, how should I say, highlight the work of a lot of composers that people might not know about otherwise. There's a piece called Horn Blot by Daniel Horth that Anna-Mia Larsson played here at the International Symposium in 2009, piece for solo horn. And because I had asked each of the guest artists, if possible, to play something by a composer from their country.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And so she played this piece to represent Sweden. And she was on the same recital as Jeff Nelson, who actually played a piece by Erica Raum, a Canadian composer, on his. And so he came out after she had played. Of course, it's sort of like, Anna-Mia is a tough act to follow. And Jeff says, "How about those Swedish composers, eh?" And of course, I got a nice laugh from everybody. But then he played this piece by Erica Raum, who's actually the daughter of Elizabeth.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we had Swedish pieces and Canadian pieces back to back in that recital, and that's another example right there how the Horn Society is able to highlight the work of composers writing for the horn.
I was just going to say, I mean, and horn players in general are very supportive of new music. I mean, we in general, we're up for a challenge. I mean, we play the hardest instrument, so at least so I've been told. So, but yeah, we're up for a challenge, and I think, as I said, any composers out there who are listening who may have some hesitancy or anxiety about writing for the horn, I would just say, just go for it. Jump in with both feet and work with a horn player, as you said, and get feedback and listen to other great works for horn to get an idea of what the horn can and can't do. But this is a great contest, and it's such a wonderful tradition for the society. It's going on. It's, what are we, 50-some years, 40-some years?
So the very first one was in 1979.
Yeah, so over 40 years. 43, yeah.
Yeah. And at the beginning, they had one every year, but after about almost 20 years, they decided to make it every 2 years.
Yeah.
And there was a couple years in there, and the whole story you can find in this book by Jeff Snedeker.
That's right.
where there was changeover from one administrator of the contest to another, and so there was a little bit of a pause in between, and we sort of restructured it each time that happened.
Right.
Because each of the coordinators of the contest had ideas, but also too the things had changed. Because I can remember right around 1989, the Horn Society's Advisory Council, we put together this idea of the manuscript press. Because
that's right. Yep.
we found that, there's some pieces, originally Lowell Shaw was going to publish horn ensemble things in there, but some of the things just didn't work out for his catalog. And then a couple of the other publishers, Amal Doer and Hornseth Music, I think were the other ones, just went out of business.
Right.
And so we had to find something else. So we ended up creating this IHS manuscript press where composers like who won the composition contest could get the pieces published on demand by this office of the Horn Society. And we did that for quite a few years. And now, of course, you've been involved with this now. It's gone as an online publication.
Yep.
And that's been very good that way, too, because if a composer doesn't have another outlet for publication, and it's a piece that's won the competition, that's a great outlet for them.
Yeah, and it's all digital. There are no print copies in a warehouse or anything, and it's not print on demand. You buy the PDF and it gets sent directly to you.
Yes.
The royalty agreement is very generous. I would encourage any composers that have pieces with horn to submit them to the online music sales.
Yes, yeah. So we've been very involved in trying to encourage new music for the horn, and that's another outlet right there that sort of came out of the composition contest, historically at least.
Yeah. Well, I just want to mention one more time for composers, go to ihs.org and find the composition contest tab. It's very easy to find in the menu at the top of the screen, and start working on your compositions if you don't have one already. The deadline is in December. So
yes, 1st is December.
Yeah.
And you can submit it now if you want. We've started receiving some already, and that's good because we don't want the website to crash on November 30th. that would be unfortunate.
Well, Randy, thanks so much for talking with me today. It's been a real pleasure.
You're very welcome. I'm very supportive of this whole project, the project of the Horn Society to begin with, but the composition contest project is specific.